There's a man who died in 1961 who understood you better than most people alive today ever will. He never met you. He never knew your name. He never knew your specific struggles or your specific relationships or your specific pain. But he spent his entire life studying something that connects all of us, something that runs underneath every thought you've ever had, every pattern you keep repeating, every relationship that hurt you, every version of yourself you've tried to become. He studied the human psyche, not the surface of it, not the parts we show each other, the deep parts, the parts we don't even show ourselves. His name was CARL Jung, and what he discovered changes everything. Who was CARL Jung, and why does he matter? Before we get into the 10 things, let me give you a quick picture of who Jung actually was, because understanding the man helps you understand why his ideas carry so much weight. CARL Jung was born in Switzerland in 1875. He became a psychiatrist and psychoanalyst. For a while, he was very close to Sigmund Freud, who most people have heard of. Freud was the one who popularized the idea of the unconscious mind. The idea that there are thoughts and feelings and memories that exist below the level of our conscious awareness and that drive our behavior. Jung took that idea seriously, but he took it much further than Freud did. Freud thought the unconscious was mostly about personal experience, your childhood, your repressed memories, your suppressed desires. Jung agreed with that, but he believed there was something even deeper, something he called the collective unconscious, a layer of the human psyche that isn't just personal, that is shared by all human beings, that contains patterns and symbols and emotional content that shows up across every culture, every religion, every mythology, every art form throughout all of human history. He called these universal patterns archetypes. Jung also developed some of the ideas that we still use in psychology and self-help today. The introvert and extrovert distinction, the shadow self, the persona, individuation, the concept of synchronicity. Most importantly, Jung was a person who took the inner life seriously. At a time when psychology was mostly about diagnosing disorders and prescribing treatments, Jung was saying something different. He was saying that the psyche has its own wisdom, that the unconscious is not just a dumping ground for bad memories, that it's trying to communicate something, and that learning to listen to it is one of the most important things a human being can do. This is why his work still matters, not because he had all the answers, but because he asked the right questions. Questions like, why do we keep repeating the same patterns? Why do we see in other people the things we refuse to see in ourselves? Why do we feel empty even when our lives look full? Why is becoming yourself so much harder than just becoming what everyone else wants you to be? These are not small questions, and Jung's answers to them are not small answers. Let's get into them. Lesson 1. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. This is probably Jung's most famous idea, and it's one of those things that sounds simple until you really sit with what it means. Most people go through life feeling like things happen to them, like certain patterns repeat because of bad luck or bad timing or the wrong people or circumstances outside their control. I keep ending up in relationships with the same type of person. I always self-sabotage when things start going well. I always end up in jobs where I'm undervalued. Every time I get close to someone, they leave. We call this fate. We call it bad luck. We call it just how things are for me. Jung would say that's not fate. That's your unconscious doing what it was trained to do. Here's what he meant. Your unconscious mind contains beliefs, patterns, and emotional responses that were formed long before you were old enough to examine them or choose them. They were formed in childhood mostly, through experience, through what you were taught, either directly or by observation. And these unconscious patterns are running all the time. In the background, below your awareness, they're the reason you're attracted to unavailable people even when you consciously say you want stability. The attraction is coming from an unconscious pattern that was formed before you had the ability to question it. They're the reason you self-sabotage when things go well. Because somewhere in your unconscious is a belief that you don't deserve good things, or that they won't last, or that you have to work for everything, and if it comes too easily, it must not be real. They're the reason you keep ending up in the same dynamics at work. Because the unconscious pattern that was formed in your family of origin is now playing out in every authority relationship you have. You don't choose these patterns consciously. They just run, and you experience the results of them and wonder why the same things keep happening to you. Jung's answer is, make them conscious, which means look at them, name them, examine them, ask, where did this come from? Is this actually true? Is this actually mine? Or did I absorb this from someone else? The moment you become conscious of a pattern, you have a choice about it for the first time. Before that moment, you have no choice. It just happens. This is why therapy works when it works. Not because a therapist tells you what to do, but because they help you see what's been running in the dark. And once you see it, you can change it. Sit with this one for a moment. Think about a pattern in your life that keeps repeating, a type of relationship you keep finding yourself in, a way things tend to go at work, a reaction you have that always seems to make things worse. Now ask, when did I first learn this pattern? Where did I first see this dynamic? What does my unconscious believe that would make this pattern make sense? You don't have to have all the answers right now. Just starting to ask the question is the beginning of making the unconscious conscious. Lesson 2, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. This one makes people uncomfortable, and it should, because it's suggesting something most of us don't want to hear. The things that bother you most about other people, the behaviors that irritate you, frustrate you, infuriate you, the traits in other people that you find most unacceptable, those things are telling you something about yourself, not about them, about you. This is what Jung called projection, and it's one of the most consistent and most uncomfortable aspects of human psychology. Here's how it works. Most of us have parts of ourselves that we've learned to reject. Parts that we've been told are unacceptable, or shameful, or wrong. Parts that don't fit the image we have of ourselves or that we've been given by our families or our culture. So we push those parts down. We deny them. We tell ourselves, I'm not like that. But those parts don't disappear. They go into the shadow. And from the shadow, they look for expression. And one of the ways they find expression is through our reactions to other people. When we see a trait in someone else that we've pushed into our own shadow, we react to it with unusual intensity. Not just mild irritation, but real, charged, disproportionate irritation. That intensity is the signal. That's the shadow waving at you. Let me give you an example. Someone who is intensely irritated by other people's neediness might want to ask themselves, where do I feel needy? Where do I have needs that I've learned to suppress and deny? Because the people who react most intensely to neediness in others are often the people who are most afraid of their own needs. Someone who is intensely irritated by other people's selfishness might want to ask, where am I afraid to put myself first? Where do I suppress my own desires and wants because I've decided they're selfish? Because the people who are most bothered by selfishness in others are often the people who are most rigid about self-sacrifice. Someone who judges others harshly for being lazy might want to look at where they're afraid to rest, where they've decided that rest is unacceptable and productivity is mandatory. This doesn't mean the other person's behavior is okay. Maybe they really are needy or selfish or lazy. That might be true, but the intensity of your reaction to it, the heat in it, that belongs to you. And if you follow that heat inward instead of outward, it leads somewhere useful. It leads to parts of yourself that are asking to be acknowledged. Next time something about someone drives you genuinely crazy, instead of just being annoyed, try getting curious. Ask yourself, what is this reaction telling me? What does this person embody that I've rejected in myself? You might be surprised what you find. Lesson 3, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. This one sounds like a motivational quote, but it's not. It's actually one of the heaviest things Jung ever said, because he's not saying become who you want to be. He's not saying achieve your goals or follow your dreams. He's saying become who you truly are. And the reason he called it a privilege is because most people never do it. Most people spend their entire lives becoming who other people need them to be, who their parents wanted them to be, who their culture told them to be, who their partner expects them to be, who their job requires them to be. They wear mask after mask after mask, and somewhere underneath all those masks is an actual self, a true self, a person with specific gifts and specific wounds, and a specific way of seeing the world. But that true self never gets to come out because there's always another expectation to meet, another role to fill, another person to keep happy. Jung had a name for the journey of becoming yourself. He called it individuation. Individuation is the process of separating from the collective, from the crowd, from what everyone else needs you to be, and finding out who you are when you strip all of that away. It is not a comfortable process, because in order to become who you truly are, you have to stop being what everyone else expects. And that disappoints people. That upsets people. That sometimes ends relationships. The parent who wanted you to be a certain kind of person, the partner who fell in love with the masked version of you, the friends who knew you as the role you were playing. When you start individuating, when you start becoming yourself for real, some of those people won't recognize you. Some of them won't like who you're becoming. Some of them will try to pull you back to the version of you that was more convenient for them, and you have to be willing to disappoint them. This is why Jung called it a privilege, because it costs something. It requires real courage. It requires choosing yourself over and over again, even when that choice makes other people uncomfortable. Most people decide the cost is too high. They keep the masks on. They keep meeting everyone else's expectations. They keep being who they're supposed to be, and they live a life that feels vaguely wrong somehow, a life that looks fine from the outside but feels hollow from the inside, because the person living it is not actually themselves. The question Jung is asking with this is simple but not easy. Who are you underneath everything you were taught to be? Lesson 4. Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes. We live in a world that tells us the answers are outside. The right relationship, the right job, the right body, the right amount of money, the right city, the right group of friends, the right level of success. We're constantly looking outward for the thing that's going to make everything finally feel okay. The thing that's going to quiet the anxiety, the thing that's going to fill the emptiness, the thing that's going to make us feel like we've arrived, and we chase these things. We work for them, we sacrifice for them, and sometimes we get them. And then there's that moment that nobody really talks about. The moment after you get the thing you were sure was going to fix everything, and it didn't fix everything. The relationship is real, but the emptiness is still there. The success is real, but the anxiety is still there. The money is real, but the feeling that something is missing is still there. And the response to that discovery is usually to look further outside, to decide that this wasn't quite the right relationship, or this wasn't quite enough success, or this wasn't quite the right version of the thing. So the search continues. Jung is saying, stop. The search outside is a dream. It's not real. It can't give you what you're looking for because what you're looking for isn't out there. It's in here, the clarity you're seeking about your life, your purpose, your relationships, your choices. That clarity comes from looking inward, not from finding the right external circumstances. Now here's the thing, looking inward is not comfortable. It's not a meditation app or a journaling practice where you sit quietly and feel peaceful. It's uncomfortable. It's confrontational. It requires looking at things you'd rather not look at, your actual motivations, not the story you tell yourself about why you do things, the real underlying reasons, your actual fears, not the surface level, I'm afraid of failure, but what's underneath that, what failure actually means to you, what it would say about you if you failed, where that belief came from, your actual patterns, the ways you keep doing the same things and getting the same results and pretending to be surprised, your actual grief, the losses you've never fully processed, the things you wanted and didn't get that you've decided you're over, but you're not really over. Looking at all of this is hard. It's genuinely hard. And it doesn't feel peaceful and clear the way we imagine inner work will feel. But on the other side of it is something that no external circumstance can give you. Real clarity, not the temporary feeling of having found the right thing, but an actual stable understanding of who you are and what matters to you and why you do what you do. And from that place, you make different choices, better choices, not because you're trying harder, but because you can finally see clearly. Lesson 5. We cannot change anything unless we accept it. This might be the one that people resist most, because we've been taught that acceptance means giving up, that accepting something means you're okay with it, that if you accept a problem, you're letting it win. Jung is saying the opposite. He's saying that acceptance is the prerequisite for change, not the alternative to it. Here's what he means. When we don't accept something, we fight it. We spend enormous energy denying it, arguing with it, telling ourselves it shouldn't be this way, wishing it were different, being angry that it is the way it is. And while we're doing all of that fighting, the thing doesn't change because we're spending all our energy on the resistance, not on the actual problem. Think about something in your life right now that you haven't accepted. Maybe it's a characteristic you have that you hate, a tendency toward anxiety, or people-pleasing, or self-sabotage, or anger. And you spend a lot of energy being furious with yourself for being this way, telling yourself you shouldn't be like this, criticizing yourself every time it shows up. Has that changed it? Probably not. Because the energy you're putting into hating the pattern is not the same as understanding it and working with it. Acceptance means something specific here. It doesn't mean I'm fine with this. It means this is real. This actually exists. This is actually part of my experience. It means stopping the fight with reality long enough to actually see it. And when you actually see it, you can work with it. You can understand where it came from. You can figure out what it's protecting you from. You can start to gently, slowly change it. But if you're too busy being furious with it to look at it honestly, none of that is possible. This applies in relationships too. One of the most common ways people stay stuck in painful dynamics is by refusing to accept what the other person actually is, not what they could be, not what they used to be, not what they'd be if only they tried harder or loved more or changed this one thing, but what they actually are right now based on their consistent behavior over time. Accepting that someone is not going to change doesn't mean you have to be okay with it. It doesn't mean you have to stay. It means you stop organizing your life around the hope that they'll become someone they haven't been. And from that acceptance, you can make an actual choice. A real choice based on reality, not on hope. This is one of the most difficult things Jung asks of us, because acceptance requires giving up the version of reality we prefer in favor of the version that actually exists. But it's also one of the most liberating. Lesson 6. Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of other people. This connects to the shadow work we talked about earlier, but it goes somewhere specific and really important. Most of us are afraid of our own darkness. The parts of us that can be petty or jealous or cruel or selfish or resentful or manipulative. We don't want those parts to exist. We certainly don't want other people to see them. So we push them down. We deny them. We tell ourselves, I'm not like that. And then we encounter darkness in other people, cruelty or manipulation or selfishness. And we have two possible responses. One, we're shocked. We can't understand it. We have no framework for it. We take it personally. We're devastated by it. We can't believe someone we trusted could do something like that. Two, we recognize it, not because we approve of it, but because we know that impulse exists in human beings, including ourselves. We've seen it in ourselves. We understand where it comes from. We're not naive about human nature, and because of that, we can respond more clearly and more effectively. Jung is saying that the second response is only available to you if you've done the work of knowing your own darkness. If you've never honestly looked at your own capacity for cruelty, you'll be blindsided by other people's. If you've never acknowledged your own selfishness, you won't see other people's coming. If you've never sat with your own anger and understood it, you'll be overwhelmed by theirs. But when you know your own shadow, when you've looked honestly at the parts of yourself you'd rather not see, you develop a kind of practical wisdom about human nature that you can't get any other way. You stop being shocked by things that are consistent with human nature. You start seeing warning signs that you would have missed before. You stop projecting impossible goodness onto people and then feeling betrayed when they turn out to be human. This doesn't make you cynical, it makes you clear. And clarity in your relationships is one of the most protective things you can have. Think about the most naive person you know, the one who keeps getting hurt in the same kinds of relationships, keeps trusting the wrong people, keeps being blindsided by behavior that others saw coming from a mile away. Usually that's someone who hasn't looked at their own darkness, so they have no framework for recognizing it in others. They've decided that darkness is something other people have, and that keeps them vulnerable to it in a way that self-awareness would prevent. Jung is not asking you to become hard or suspicious. He's asking you to be honest about yourself first, because that honesty is what protects you. Lesson 7. Loneliness does not come from having no people around, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you. This one is for everyone who has ever felt completely alone in a room full of people. Everyone who has ever sat at a dinner table surrounded by family and felt entirely by themselves. Everyone who has ever been in a relationship, a long relationship, and still felt fundamentally unseen. Jung is saying that loneliness isn't about the number of people around you. It's about whether the things that are most true about you can be expressed and received. Think about what you talk about in most of your relationships. Work, logistics, surface events. What happened today? What's happening tomorrow? Plans, schedules, news, other people. Now think about the things you don't say, the things that feel too deep, or too strange, or too vulnerable, or too much, the fears you carry, the grief that's still with you, the questions you have about yourself and your life that you haven't found answers to, the things you believe that you're not sure other people would understand, the parts of your inner world that feel too private to share. For many people, these things never get said, not because they're unspeakable, but because there's no one safe enough to say them to, and the result of that is a profound loneliness that has nothing to do with being physically alone. You can be deeply lonely in a full life. You can be deeply lonely in a long marriage. You can be deeply lonely at a party, because what you're lonely for isn't company. It's contact, real contact. The experience of being actually known by another person, not just known in terms of facts about your life, but known in terms of what matters to you, what scares you, what you think about when you can't sleep, what you actually believe about the world. This is what intimacy actually is, in Jung's understanding. Not physical closeness, emotional and intellectual contact, and its absence even when you're surrounded by people is one of the most painful forms of loneliness there is. So what do you do with this? Part of it is finding people who can receive what's real in you. Not performing honesty to people who can't hold it, but genuinely looking for relationships where depth is possible. Part of it is being willing to offer what's real first, because real contact requires someone to go first, someone to say something true before they know how it will be received. And part of it is acknowledging how lonely you actually are, because many people have gotten so used to the loneliness that they've stopped noticing it. They've filled their lives with enough noise and activity that the feeling is always just below the surface and never fully felt. Jung would say, feel it, acknowledge it, and then look for real contact, not more company, real contact. Lesson 8. The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Jung didn't say it was hard to accept yourself. He said it was terrifying. That's a specific word, and he meant it because most of us, if we're honest, have not fully accepted ourselves. We've accepted the parts we like, the parts we're proud of, the parts that fit the image we want to have. But the rest, the parts that are weak or scared or small or petty or broken, we tolerate those parts. We manage them. We try to fix them or minimize them or hide them from other people, but we don't accept them. And Jung is saying that not accepting them is costing you more than you realize. Because when there are parts of yourself that you can't accept, those parts have to be managed constantly. You have to monitor yourself. You have to be careful. You have to make sure those parts don't show. That management takes enormous energy. Energy that could be going somewhere else. And it creates a specific kind of anxiety. The anxiety of someone who is always slightly afraid of being found out. Always slightly afraid that someone is going to see the part of them that they're working so hard to hide. Full self-acceptance means something different. It means all of this is me, the strong parts and the broken parts, the generous parts and the petty parts, the brave parts and the scared parts. All of it is human. All of it is acceptable. All of it is allowed to exist. Now, this doesn't mean you stop trying to grow or change. It doesn't mean you decide the parts of you that hurt people are fine and you don't need to work on them. It means you stop fighting your own existence. You stop spending energy on hating the parts of yourself that embarrass you. You stop performing a version of yourself that only shows the acceptable parts. You stop living in fear of being fully seen. And the paradox that Jung identified is that full self-acceptance is actually what makes real change possible. Because when you stop fighting what you are, you have the energy to gently work with it. When you stop hating the anxious part of yourself, you can actually understand what that anxiety is trying to protect you from. When you stop being ashamed of the needy part of yourself, you can actually address the underlying need. The fighting keeps everything frozen. The acceptance allows it to move. This is one of the things Jung said that takes a long time to really understand. Not because it's complicated, but because the fear of fully accepting yourself is genuinely terrifying. And sitting with that fear long enough to move through it is real work. Lesson 9. In each of us, there is another whom we do not know. This is one of Jung's more mysterious ideas, but it's also one of his most practically useful. He's talking about the shadow again, but from a specific angle. He's saying, there is a version of you that you don't know, a part of your psyche that operates independently of your conscious awareness, that has its own agenda, its own needs, its own responses to the world, and this unknown part of you is influencing your behavior constantly. You've probably noticed it. You react to something with more intensity than seems appropriate for the situation, and afterward you think, where did that come from? You say something cruel that you immediately regret, and you think, that's not me. I don't know why I said that. You feel inexplicably attracted to someone who you know is wrong for you. And no matter how many times you tell yourself to stop, the attraction is still there. You self-sabotage something important, a relationship or an opportunity or a goal. In a way, that part of you seemed to want to fail. These are all the other that Jung is talking about. The unknown part of you that doesn't behave the way your conscious self would choose. And Jung's point is not to be frightened of this. His point is to become curious about it. When something happens that feels like that's not me, instead of dismissing it or being horrified by it, try asking, what does this tell me about the part of me I don't know? That reactive anger that seems to come from nowhere? What is it protecting? When did anger learn to show up so fast in you? That self-sabotage. What does the part of you that keeps pulling you back believe? That you don't deserve to succeed? That success is dangerous? That something bad will happen if things go well? That attraction to the wrong person? What does the unknown part of you believe about love? About what you deserve? About what's familiar even when it's painful? The other inside us isn't a problem to be solved. It's a part of us that's trying to communicate something. And learning to listen to it rather than fight it or ignore it is one of the most important forms of self-knowledge there is. Lesson 10. I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. We're at the last one, and I saved this one for last intentionally, because everything else we've talked about, the unconscious patterns, the shadow, the projection, the persona, the loneliness, the self-acceptance, all of it can feel heavy. It can feel like a lot of things that happen to you that you now have to deal with. And it is a lot. Jung was honest about that. He never pretended the inner work was light or easy or quick. But this last thing is the one that holds everything else together. You are not what happened to you. Think about what that actually means. You had experiences that shaped you. Childhood experiences that formed beliefs and patterns and responses. Relationship experiences that taught you things about love and trust and safety. Losses that marked you. Betrayals that changed you. Trauma that left an imprint. All of that is real. All of it had an effect. All of it lives somewhere in your psychology and influences your behavior in ways you're still discovering. But here's what Jung is saying. That is not who you are. That is what happened to you. That is what formed you. That is what you carry. But who you are is what you do with all of that. And the most powerful word in this entire quote is choose. Not what I accidentally become, not what I inevitably become because of what happened to me. What I choose to become. That choice is the part that belongs entirely to you. Nobody can make it for you. Nobody can take it from you. Nobody can override it. The person who was not protected as a child can choose to become someone who protects others. The person who was dismissed and unseen can choose to become someone who makes others feel deeply seen. The person who learned love was conditional can choose to offer love that isn't. The person who was shaped by chaos can choose to create stability. Not instantly, not without work, not without help, not without the genuine and ongoing process of making the unconscious conscious, facing the shadow, understanding the patterns, doing all the hard internal work that Jung spent his life pointing toward. But yes, genuinely, actually, you can choose, and that choice is not a one-time thing. It's not a decision you make once and then you're done. It's something you choose over and over and over again, in the small moments and the big ones, in the easy days and the genuinely hard ones. But the capacity to choose is there. It was always there. Even in the most patterned, the most conditioned, the most wounded person Jung ever worked with. The capacity to choose was there, because the psyche is not a machine that just runs its programming. It is a living thing that can become conscious of itself. And consciousness, once it arrives, changes everything. This is the gift that Jung spent his whole life pointing toward. Not that your past doesn't matter. It does. Not that your patterns aren't real. They are. Not that the work is easy. It isn't. But that you are not reducible to any of it. You are what you choose to become. And that choosing is still available to you, right now, today, in whatever you do next. Now that we've learned 10 things from Carl Jung, we can say that he took the inner life seriously at a time when most people didn't. When the world was focused on the external, the measurable, the visible, Jung kept pointing inward. He kept saying, the thing you're looking for isn't out there. The answers to why you keep repeating the same patterns, why you feel lonely even when you're surrounded by people, why you feel like you're not living the right life, even when your life looks fine. Those answers are in here, in the unconscious, in the shadow, in the persona you're wearing, in the self you've never fully allowed to exist, and his invitation, which is still standing today, is to go in there, to look honestly, to make the unconscious conscious, to become who you truly are instead of who you were taught to be. That journey is not comfortable, but it is real, and it leads somewhere worth going. I'd love to know which of these 10 things landed most for you. Which one changed something in how you see yourself? Drop it in the comments. I genuinely read them all. And if you know someone who's been asking these kinds of questions about themselves, someone who's trying to understand why they keep repeating the same patterns, or why they feel so alone, or why becoming themselves feels so hard, share this with them, because Jung's work was meant to reach exactly that person. Subscribe for more content that takes the inner life seriously, and remember what Jung said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. That privilege is still available to you. See you in the next one.